Welcome to the Metal Hammer podcast. We're live in the studio with the legend that is Devin Townsend.
Hey,
how the devil are you, sir?
I am absolutely wonderful. This morning has been great. I've got a coffee with my name spelt wrong on it. Everything is off to a good start.
Amazing. And Saturday, the Retinal Circus.
Yeah.
We're fucking excited.
So am I.
Please tell me how you're feeling about it.
You know what? We've got tons of serious things to do in our music and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, my life is full of interviews and perpetual talking about myself and all that. That Retinal is a chance for not only me, but the people that show up to it and everybody who's put in so much work in it to have a good Saturday. Yeah. Honestly, and that's the bottom line of it. And everybody's got a certain role that we play. And, you know, part of my role is to be the face of it and to talk about it and all this sort of stuff, but it really is about everybody who's involved with it, right? And I do include the audience with that because, again, what are we trying to get across with this? We're trying to introduce what I do musically as a vehicle for spectacles that aren't necessarily about me and my vision. It's about everybody who's put in work for this. I mean, we've got circus people and musicians and, you know, and people who've done the logistics of it, and everybody has put in a ton of work on it. And ultimately, we all are doing it because it's an opportunity for us to play at an awesome venue and to have an awesome Saturday night, right? And that's it. Yeah. And it's like, it's as epic as we can make it at this particular stage of what we do, like financially or you know, with time-wise or whatever. But hopefully people will see it and say, well, I wonder what would happen if we gave these bananas, like, you know, like Katy Perry's backline. You know what I mean? Yeah. We'd be like, oh, really? Well, in that case, you know, 700-foot inflatable Ziltoids distributing cheeseburgers and, you know, honorary monocles for all, right?
Elephants on roller skates.
Yeah, and live panda births, right? Like, you know, it's
going to be amazing.
Yeah, at this point, you know, we couldn't book the panda, but I mean, you know, with what we can do, we have, and I don't know, man. Again, it's like, you know, I've been doing interviews and people are like, well, you know, you must be nervous or whatever. And I'm like, no. You see, this part of it for me is if you think about this stuff and take it seriously, then yeah, you're gonna, you know, get all hung up on it. But for me, it's like, this is what I've wanted to do forever. I love doing this shit. This is great. So to be able to do this and to do it with friends and to, you know, have people excited about it, I mean, that's awesome, man.
I mean, the first thing you did fairly recently was what? The Life by a Thread DVD. I mean, that's 4 nights where you're doing 4 really complicated albums, right? Yeah. In succession over 4 nights. Yeah. And that you pulled it off.
Yeah, by a thread.
By a thread. Right. And now, obviously, we've got the Retinal Circus to look forward to. I mean, where do you go from here, dude?
Oh, man, where couldn't you? I mean, I think the thing is, as well, is at this point, the by a thread thing and everything that we're doing is limited to time and capital and all these sort of things. However, the people who are involved with it, and not only me and my friends and everybody who's involved, but, you know, people involved with press and the label and the management, you know, the industry, in my opinion, has changed to the point where you have to be on board with each other because that's the only way it's going to work. Otherwise, you know, to have some banana get up there and say, well, this is the circus and this is going to be the vision and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it's not going to work, right? So the only reason that this stuff succeeds, whether or not it's the By a Thread shows or the Retinal thing or what we do in the future, is going to be because everybody wants it to work, right? And Retinal will work because of that. And whether or not it works in an epic, like, wow, that was like, you know, an astronomical, you know, event of Roger Waters proportions, or people just be like, that's something I can't unsee. You know what I mean? Like, either way, it's awesome. And in the future, if this succeeds, then I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of people that will want to do things more than that. And again, like, my role in it all is, yeah, sure, you know, I can be the face for it and I can talk about it and whatever, but we're all kind of in it together, right? And with that in mind, man, really, there's nothing that we can't do. As long as we kind of have people that maybe see it and we're like, yeah, well, let's, you know, you wanted a live panda birth? Well, you know, like,
there you go.
You know, Ching Lao is expecting, you know, about this time. It's like, well, book it, right?
So when it comes to creativity, you just seem light years ahead of everyone else pretty much. I mean, I'd love to know, roughly how many songs do you write a week?
Oh, I'd say about 5. But I mean, I also think that writing is a skill that you have to practice it, right? I think that when I was younger and maybe a little less sober than I am now, I'd get hung up on the ideas and I'd really try and hold on to it, right? I'd be like, oh, I've got this chorus that's the chorus. And then, I'd have like 9 bong rips and like 3 of these coffees and just sit on the stairs and just play the chorus, like for 2 weeks. And I'd never move on. But now I find that my process in terms of writing is just like, well, get it done. Don't hang on to it, man. Because if you hang on to it, you're never going to get to the next one. It's the same as shows. Like after the Buy a Thread shows, people were like, well, now what? I'm like, well, I don't know. I've got stuff to do now. I mean, the Buy a Thread stuff is finished. And to think about that is only, you're going to hang on to it. And I find the same thing about writing. For me, a lot of my ability to create a lot of music at this point has a lot to do with that mentality of going, well, just let it go, right? Like, and if something comes and you're compelled to follow it, for me, I try and like follow the things that I'm interested in, like Epicloud, for example. After deconstruction and everything, it was such a convoluted and chaotic process, and the theme was so insular and narcissistic that after it was done, I was like, well, I'm just not interested in that anymore. Well, what are you interested in? And I'm like, well, that. I want something that's fun. I want something that's, maybe like this quasi sort of like spiritual thing without any religion or whatever, just that vibe, that sort of like, hallelujah, religion's stupid, but hallelujah, right? And then I became really interested in that. And then as a result of being interested, I was like, well, what about this is interesting? I'm like, well, this and that and the other thing, and this sort of sound and these sort of bands and this sort of aesthetic. And, and then, well, what about that aesthetic in the past has interested you? And I'm like, well, any albums that I've been interested that are like that have got this kind of common thread. And then those sorts of elements of it become really interesting. And I find as a person, once I do have an interest in something, I follow it until it's like obsessively finished. And then I stand back from it and go, what did we do? And I'm like, oh shit, really? Oh, okay. But then once it's done, it's like, okay, next. And so now I'm on this other thing. I'm in this Casualties of Cool record. That's
the next one.
Yeah, and I love it. Like last night, I woke up at 2 a.m. I listened to it for like 3 hours, right? And the whole time I was listening to it, it's like, wow, people who like Epicloud are going to be pissed, right? You know what I mean?
Wicked.
But again, it's like, once a record's finished and I'm like satisfied that it's reached the conclusion that it wants to go in, regardless of whether or not that conclusion is something that's like artistically or commercially, the right move. If I'm interested in it, then that's the compulsion. It's like, and I always know which direction I'm going to go next because it's a thing that I keep thinking about. I'm like, well, that's interesting to me now. And then I finish it, and then you move on, right?
And moving on, I mean, do you ever find it difficult to outdo yourself? Do you ever look at what you did last time and think, how the fuck am I going to top that?
Well, it's not, that's not part of the equation, to be honest. It's like, it's never a matter of outdoing myself, right? Like, because it's different. It's like Epicloud was Epicloud, and now Casualties is Casualties. I got so little in common other than, the banana whose like face is on it, right? that to compete with each other, it doesn't really factor into it. And it's the same with shows. Like Retinal is different than Buy a Thread. Buy a Thread was different than the Ziltoid thing, and what we do next year will be different than Retinal. And for one thing to compare to the other, I think, you end up fighting yourself, right? And I fought myself for years, and I kind of both won and lost, and now that fight's over. Now I'm like, okay, what are we doing now? Right? Like that fight, oh, I'm over that, right? Like, let's just have some fun, right? And so nothing competes with itself.